What happens when three prestigious professors think they can humiliate a young college student during an academic panel? They had no idea they were about to face someone whose credentials would leave them speechless. Sometimes the most experienced person in the room is the one everyone assumes knows the least. And sometimes the eighth story reveals that wisdom has no age limit. The autumn leaves crunched beneath Sarah Chen's worn sneakers as she hurried across the Georgetown University campus, her weathered backpack bouncing against her slight frame. At 19, Sarah looked like any other sophomore rushing to make it to class on time, but appearances could be deceiving. Her unassuming exterior faded jeans, oversized Georgetown sweatshirt, and wire-rimmed glasses that had seen better days masked a brilliant mind that operated at levels few could comprehend. The late October morning was crisp and bright, with golden sunlight filtering through the ancient oak trees that lined the historic campus. Students clustered in small groups on the quad, some studying for midterms, others simply enjoying the brief respite from their demanding coursework. Sarah navigated through them with quiet purpose, her destination clear in her mind. She was heading to the Walsh School of Foreign Service, Georgetown's prestigious international affairs college, where a high-level symposium titled Modern Intelligence Threats in the Digital Age was about to begin. The event had been weeks in the planning, drawing some of the most respected names in academia and policy circles. Sarah had registered as soon as the announcement went out, though she doubted anyone organizing the event had paid much attention to one more undergraduate name on the list. The truth was, Sarah Chen was far from an ordinary student. While her classmates struggled with introductory courses in international relations and basic statistics, Sarah spent her evenings analyzing classified intelligence reports for a joint NSA-CIA program that recruited exceptional young minds. Her security clearance was higher than that of most professors on campus. Her insights had already influenced policy decisions at the highest levels of government. But today, she was just another face in the crowd, another curious student eager to learn from her supposed betters. She preferred it that way. The anonymity allowed her to observe, to listen, to gather information, without the complications that came with revealing her true role. It also protected the carefully constructed double life she had built to maintain her cover. The Walsh School building loomed before her, its neoclassical architecture a testament to Georgetown's long history of educating future diplomats and international leaders. Sarah climbed the stone steps, her mind already focused on what she hoped to gain from the morning's proceedings. The symposium promised insights into current intelligence challenges, though Sarah suspected much of what would be discussed would be sanitized for public consumption. Inside the building, the atmosphere buzzed with academic energy. Graduate students clustered around renowned professors, hoping to impress them with insightful questions or observations. Visiting scholars from think tanks and government agencies mingled with faculty members, their conversations a mixture of intellectual discourse and professional networking. Sarah moved through it all like a ghost, largely invisible to the networking crowds who were focused on more obviously important figures. The main auditorium was already filling when Sarah arrived. She found a seat toward the back, close enough to hear clearly, but far enough from the front to avoid drawing attention. As she settled in, she pulled out a notebook and pen, the tools of a diligent student documenting an educational experience. No one would suspect that her real purpose was to assess how much the academic community actually understood about the intelligence challenges they were about to discuss. The three panelists took their seats at the front of the auditorium with the self-assured bearing of men who had built their careers on being the smartest people in any room. Dr. Richard Blackwood, the moderator, was an imposing figure in his mid-50s, whose full head of silver hair and expensive suit commanded immediate respect. His reputation as a leading expert in national security policy was well established. Built on decades of academic research and occasional consulting work with government agencies, Dr. Michelle Torres, the first panelist, carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent years studying intelligence operations from the comfort of academic settings. Her sharp features and penetrating gaze suggested a mind that cut through complexity with ease. Though Sarah knew that theoretical knowledge and practical experience were often worlds apart, Dr. James Patterson, the department chair and final panelist, radiated the particular brand of authority that came with academic seniority. His deep voice and deliberate manner of speaking had dominated countless faculty meetings and graduate seminars, establishing him as an unquestioned authority on matters of international security. As the auditorium filled to capacity, Sarah noticed the demographics of the audience: graduate students, faculty members, visiting researchers, and a smattering of undergraduates who had managed to secure seats. She was clearly among the youngest. People present a fact that would become significant as the morning progressed. Dr. Blackwood stepped to the podium to begin his opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's symposium on modern intelligence threats in the digital age. We live in an era of unprecedented technological advancement, where the traditional boundaries of espionage and counterintelligence have been fundamentally altered by digital innovation. His voice carried the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to holding audiences captive with his expertise. Today we'll explore how intelligence agencies adapt to emerging threats, challenges of cybersecurity in an interconnected world, and the evolving landscape of international espionage. Our distinguished panel brings decades of combined experience studying these critical issues. Yes. Sarah listened carefully as each panelist was introduced, noting the emphasis on their academic credentials and consulting experiences. Their resumes were impressive by university standards, filled with published papers, think tank affiliations, and occasional briefings for government officials. Yet as she listened, Sarah couldn't help but notice the gap between their theoretical knowledge and the realities she dealt with daily in her actual intelligence work. The formal presentations began with Dr. Torres discussing the evolution of cyber threats. Her analysis was competent but surface level, drawing heavily from publicly available sources and academic theories. But Sarah detected the subtle inaccuracies that came from secondhand knowledge. Dr. Patterson followed with a presentation on human intelligence gathering in the digital age. His approach was similarly academic, relying on historical case studies and theoretical frameworks rather than contemporary operational realities. Sarah found herself quietly correcting his assumptions in her mind, drawing on her direct experience with current human operations that remained classified. Throughout the presentations, Sarah noticed a pattern. The panelists spoke with absolute confidence about subjects they understood intellectually, but had never experienced practically. Their knowledge was broad but shallow. It's impressive to those who knew less, but fundamentally limited by its academic nature. As the formal presentations concluded, Dr. Blackwood opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up throughout the auditorium, and the subsequent discussion revealed the usual academic pattern: graduate students asking carefully crafted questions designed to impress rather than illuminate, and faculty members posing inquiries that showcased their own expertise rather than genuinely seeking new insights. Sarah remained silent through the first several questions, content to observe and evaluate. The answers the panelists provided were competent but predictable, drawing on the same public sources and academic frameworks that dominated their presentations. Nothing they said challenged her understanding or offered genuinely new perspectives on the intelligence challenges she faced daily. It was when Dr. Torres began discussing the limitations of signals intelligence that Sarah felt compelled to speak. The professor was making fundamental errors about how SIGINT actually operated, errors that would have been laughable to anyone with practical experience in the field. Her description of data collection methodologies was not just outdated but fundamentally wrong in ways that suggested a complete misunderstanding of current capabilities. Sarah raised her hand tentatively, her movements small and uncertain compared to the confident gestures of the graduate students around her. Dr. Blackwood noticed her after several moments, his eyes settling on her with mild surprise. In a room full of advanced degree candidates and faculty members, her presence as an obvious undergraduate was notable. "Yes, you have a question?" Dr. Blackwood asked, his tone carrying a subtle condescension that suggested he expected a basic inquiry from someone clearly out of her depth. Sarah stood slowly, her voice steady, despite the attention now focused on her. "I wanted to ask about the SIGINT limitations you mentioned, Dr. Torres. Your description of collection methodologies seems to suggest that agencies are still primarily relying on traditional intercept technologies. But isn't it true that quantum computing advances have fundamentally altered the landscape of signals intelligence gathering? A ripple of surprise passed through the auditorium. The question was far more sophisticated than anyone had expected from the young woman in the worn sweatshirt. Dr. Torres blinked, clearly caught off guard by the technical specificity of the inquiry. Well, Dr. Torres began, her confidence wavering, slightly quantum computing is certainly an emerging factor, but its practical applications in intelligence gathering remain largely theoretical at this point. Sarah remained standing, her expression polite but persistent. Actually, there have been significant operational implementations over the past 18 months. The NSA's quantum resistance protocols alone represent a massive shift in how they approach encrypted communications. Are you familiar with the recent developments in post-quantum cryptography and their impact on current collection capabilities? The silence in the auditorium was profound. Graduate students turned to stare at the undergraduate, who was casually discussing classified level information with the ease of someone intimately familiar with the subject. Dr. Torres's face flushed slightly as she realized she was being challenged by someone who clearly knew far more about the topic than she did. Dr. Blackwood intervened, his voice carrying a edge of irritation. "Miss, I think you might be confusing theoretical possibilities with operational realities. These are complex matters that require years of study and experience to fully understand." Sarah nodded respectfully, but didn't back down. "I understand they're complex, sir. That's why I'm curious about the panel's assessment of how these developments are affecting current counterintelligence operations, particularly given the challenges agencies face when traditional human sources encounter quantum encrypted communications networks." Dr. Patterson leaned forward, his expression darkening with annoyance. "Young lady, I think you're getting ahead of yourself. These aren't matters for undergraduate speculation. Perhaps you should focus on your introductory coursework before attempting to engage with advanced intelligence concepts." A murmur of agreement rippled through parts of the audience. Several faculty members nodded approvingly at Patterson's gentle but firm rebuke of the presumptuous student. The social dynamics were clear. An undergraduate had overstepped her bounds by challenging her academic superiors. An order needed to be restored. But Sarah remained calm, her voice unchanged. "I appreciate that perspective, Dr. Patterson. Was just hoping to understand how your theoretical frameworks account for the practical realities that intelligence professionals face daily. For instance, your presentation on humans suggested that human intelligence gathering remains fundamentally unchanged by digital evolution, but that doesn't align with how contemporary operations actually function." The word "actually" hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah wasn't speculating or theorizing. She was speaking from direct knowledge. The implication was clear to anyone paying attention, though most in the audience interpreted it as undergraduate arrogance rather than professional expertise. Dr. Blackwood's patience was wearing thin. "I think we need to remember that academic discussion requires a certain level of preparation and expertise. While enthusiasm for these subjects is commendable, there's a difference between undergraduate curiosity and professional understanding." His words carried the unmistakable tone of an authority figure putting an upstart in her place. Around the auditorium, heads nodded in agreement. The natural order was being restored, experienced professors educating an overedger student about the boundaries of appropriate academic discourse. But Sarah wasn't finished. "I understand that, sir. I was just wondering if any of the panelists have had direct experience with current intelligence operations. Because some of the operational details discussed today don't match contemporary practices, the question hit like a bombshell." Sarah had just politely suggested that 3 of Georgetown's most respected intelligence experts were fundamentally wrong about subjects they claimed to have mastered. The audacity of the challenge left the audience stunned. Dr. Torres recovered first, her voice sharp with indignation. "I think your tone is inappropriate for an academic setting. We're here to share expert knowledge, not to be questioned by students who haven't even completed their undergraduate education." Dr. Patterson joined in, his voice rising with anger. "This is exactly the kind of disrespectful behavior that undermines serious academic discourse. You clearly don't understand the difference between reading Wikipedia articles and actual expertise. The attack was personal now, designed to humiliate Sarah and reassert the professor's authority. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably as the atmosphere in the auditorium turned hostile. What had begun as an academic discussion was becoming a public dressing down of a student who had dared to challenge her betters. Sarah absorbed the criticism with remarkable composure, her expression remaining calm despite the escalating aggression directed at her. She had faced far more intense pressure in intelligence briefings with hostile foreign assets than 3 angry professors could generate. "I apologize if my questions seemed inappropriate," she said quietly. "I was genuinely trying to understand how academic research translates to operational reality. Perhaps I could share some additional context that might be helpful." Dr. Blackwood cut her off with a sharp gesture. "I think we've heard enough speculation for one morning. This is a professional symposium, not a undergraduate forum for uninformed opinions." The dismissal was brutal and final. Around the auditorium, audience members began to whisper among themselves about the arrogant student who had disrupted the symposium with inappropriate questions. The professors had successfully reframed the challenge to their expertise as student misconduct, protecting their reputations while marginalizing the source of uncomfortable questions. But Sarah wasn't done. She reached into her backpack with deliberate calm, pulling out a slim leather wallet that looked entirely ordinary. With the same quiet confidence she had displayed throughout the exchange, she opened it and held it up so the 3 professors could see its contents. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Dr. Blackwood's confident expression crumbled into shock as he stared at the federal credentials in Sarah's hand. Dr. Torres went pale, her mouth opening slightly in disbelief. Dr. Patterson leaned forward, squinting as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The badge was unmistakable. Sarah Chen, Intelligence Analyst, National Security Agency. Below it, a series of clearance indicators that placed her security. Authorization far above anything the 3 professors had ever achieved. The photograph showed the same young woman who had been dismissed as an overconfident undergraduate. But the credentials identified her as a legitimate federal intelligence professional. "I should have mentioned earlier," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying across the now silent auditorium. "I work for the NSA's Advanced Analytics Division. I've been an operational intelligence analyst for 2 years while completing my undergraduate degree. The quantum computing developments I mentioned aren't theoretical. They're part of my daily work environment." The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the auditorium stared at the young woman who had just revealed herself to be not an overconfident student, but a federal intelligence professional whose expertise far exceeded that of the professors who had been lecturing her about intelligence matters. Dr. Blackwood was the first to find his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. That's not possible. You're just a student." Sarah returned the credentials to her backpack with the same calm precision she had displayed throughout the exchange. "I am a student," she agreed. "I'm also an intelligence analyst." 2 aren't mutually exclusive. The federal government has several programs for recruiting exceptional students directly into operational roles. Dr. Torres struggled to process what she had just witnessed. "But you're so young. How could you have the experience too? ... "Age and experience aren't always correlated," Sarah replied gently. "Intelligence work often benefits from fresh perspectives and technological fluency. The questions I asked today came from direct operational experience with the systems and challenges you were discussing." The transformation in the auditorium was remarkable. The same audience that had sided with the professors against an upstart student now stared at Sarah with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. The power dynamics had shifted completely, revealing that the person they had dismissed as ignorant was actually the most qualified individual in the room too. "Discuss intelligence." Matt Tatterson made a desperate attempt to recover. "Well, of course, we appreciate the perspective of operational personnel. But academic analysis provides important theoretical frameworks that complement field experience." Sarah nodded graciously, showing no trace of triumph or vindication. Despite the complete reversal of the morning's dynamic, absolutely. Theoretical frameworks are essential for understanding broader patterns and implications. I was just hoping to contribute some practical context to the discussion. Her magnanimous response only highlighted the professor's earlier behavior more starkly. While they had responded to her questions with condescension and hostility, she was treating their discomfort with professional courtesy and respect. Dr. Blackwood cleared his throat, clearly struggling to regain control of a symposium that had spiraled completely beyond his expectations. Perhaps we could benefit from Ms. Chen's professional insights. Would you be willing to share your perspective on contemporary intelligence? Challenges. The invitation was grudging, but necessary. The three professors had been thoroughly exposed as theoretical experts lacking practical knowledge. While the student they had dismissed had proven to be a genuine intelligence professional, the natural order of academic authority had been completely inverted. Sarah stood again, but this time the audience's attention was respectful rather than skeptical. I'd be happy to share what I can within the constraints of classification requirements. One of the biggest challenges we face is the gap between academic understanding and operational reality. Much of what gets published in journals or discussed in symposiums like this is necessarily incomplete because the most current developments remain classified. She paused, scanning the attentive faces in the auditorium. For example, the quantum computing developments I mentioned earlier created both opportunities and vulnerabilities that completely reshape how we approach signals intelligence. Traditional methodologies that seemed secure 18 months ago are now potentially compromised. While new collection capabilities have opened avenues that didn't exist in any theoretical framework, the audience listened with rapt attention. As Sarah provided insights that none of the scheduled panelists could have offered, her description of contemporary intelligence challenges was detailed, nuanced, and clearly grounded in direct experience rather than academic speculation. The human intelligence aspects are equally complex, she continued. Digital evolution hasn't made human obsolete, but it has fundamentally changed how human assets are recruited, communicated with, and protected. Traditional tradecraft principles still apply, but they're implemented through technologies and methodologies that most academic literature hasn't caught up with yet. Dr. Torres attempted to ask a follow-up question, but her inquiry revealed how little she actually understood about the operational details Sarah was describing. The contrast between theoretical knowledge and practical expertise had never been more stark as Sarah continued her impromptu presentation. The audience began to appreciate not just her knowledge, but her professionalism. Despite being publicly humiliated by the three professors, she showed no vindictiveness or desire for revenge. Instead, she used the opportunity to provide genuine educational value. Sharing insights that elevated the entire discussion, one thing I'd like to emphasize, Sarah said, as she concluded her remarks, is that academic research and operational intelligence work are both essential. They serve different purposes and require different approaches. My goal today wasn't to criticize academic perspectives, but to suggest that productive dialogue between academic and operational communities could benefit everyone. The magnanimity of her statement stood in sharp contrast to the professors' earlier behavior. While they had used their authority to suppress challenging questions, she was using her expertise to bridge divides and promote understanding. Dr. Blackwood attempted to regain some measure of control over this symposium. Well, this has certainly been ... illuminating. Perhaps we should move on to other questions from the audience. But the damage to the professor's credibility was complete. The remaining questions from the audience were largely directed to Sarah rather than the scheduled panelists. Graduate students who had been impressed by the professor's credentials now recognized that real expertise sat in the back of the auditorium wearing a worn Georgetown sweatshirt. As the symposium concluded, the atmosphere in the auditorium was completely different from what anyone had expected. The three professors who had begun the morning as unquestioned authorities on intelligence matters now appeared to be exactly what they were: academics with theoretical knowledge but limited practical understanding. Meanwhile, the undergraduate student they had dismissed as ignorant had proven to be a federal intelligence professional whose expertise exceeded their own. During the post-symposium networking period, Sarah found herself surrounded by faculty, members, and graduate students eager to learn more about contemporary intelligence work. Her earlier critics maintained a respectful distance, clearly embarrassed by their public humiliation of someone who had proven to be far more qualified than they were. Dr. Patterson approached her hesitantly as the crowd began to thin. "Miss Chen, I owe you an apology. My comments earlier were inappropriate and unprofessional." Sarah accepted his apology graciously. "I understand the confusion, Dr. Patterson. It's unusual for operational personnel to be embedded in academic settings. I should have been clearer about my background from the beginning." Her generous response only highlighted the professor's poor behavior more starkly. While they had responded to perceived challenges with hostility and condescension, she was meeting genuine apologies with professional courtesy and understanding. Dr. Torres and Dr. Blackwood offered similar apologies, each acknowledging that they had misjudged both her expertise and her intentions. Sarah accepted each apology with the same grace, neither gloating over her vindication nor holding grudges against those who had attacked her. As the auditorium emptied, Sarah packed her notebook and pen back into her weathered backpack. Too casual. Observers, she looked exactly as she had that morning, a young college student heading back to class. But everyone who had witnessed the morning's events would never again make assumptions about expertise based on age or appearance. The eighth story had been revealed, and with it a profound lesson about the nature of knowledge and authority. Most qualified person in the room had been dismissed as ignorant because she didn't fit conventional expectations of what expertise looked like. Age, appearance, and academic credentials had proved to be poor indicators of actual knowledge and capability. As Sarah walked back across the Georgetown campus, she reflected on the morning's events. She had never intended to humiliate the professors or to make herself the center of attention. Her questions had been genuinely motivated by curiosity about how academic research related to operational realities. The professor's hostile response had forced her to reveal credentials she preferred to keep private. The experience reinforced something Sarah had learned early in her intelligence career. Assumptions were dangerous. Whether in academic settings or operational environments, the moment you stopped questioning, stopped listening, stopped remaining open to unexpected sources of insight, you became vulnerable to blind spots that could prove catastrophic. Her phone buzzed with a text from her NSA supervisor. "Heard you made quite an impression at Georgetown today. Hope you didn't blow your cover too badly." Sarah smiled as she typed her response. "Cover's intact. Just reminded some professors that wisdom doesn't have an age requirement." The truth was, her cover remained secure because most people would interpret the morning's events as an unusual coincidence rather than evidence of a systematic program. Placing intelligence professionals in academic settings, a few rumors might circulate, but the broader academic community would likely dismiss them as exaggerated gossip. More importantly, Sarah had succeeded in her actual mission for the morning, assessing the gap between academic understanding and operational reality. The symposium had provided valuable intelligence about how much the academic community actually knew about contemporary intelligence challenges. The answer, it turned out, was less than they thought, but more than she had expected. That evening, Sarah sat in her modest apartment off campus, writing her report on the day's activities. Her assessment would contribute to ongoing efforts to improve communication between academic and operational intelligence communities. The morning's confrontation, uncomfortable as it had been, had provided useful data about how to bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical expertise. As she worked, Sarah's mind returned to the professor's shocked faces when she had revealed her credentials. Their assumption that age and appearance determined competence had led them to make fundamental errors in judgment. In intelligence work, such assumptions could prove fatal. The eighth story was often about discovering that reality was far more complex than initial appearances suggested. A young college student could be a federal intelligence analyst. A routine academic symposium could become a lesson in humility and the dangers of intellectual arrogance. The most important insights could come from the most unexpected sources. Sarah had learned that lesson early in her career, but the three professors had learned it the hard way. In front of an auditorium full of their academic peers, it was a lesson they were unlikely to forget, and one that would hopefully make them better scholars and more thoughtful educators. The next morning brought a steady stream of emails from faculty members and graduate students who had attended the symposium. Some requested follow-up discussions about contemporary intelligence challenges. Others offered opportunities for collaboration between academic researchers and operational professionals. A few simply expressed appreciation for the insights Sarah had shared. Dr. Blackwood's email was particularly thoughtful. He acknowledged that the symposium had revealed important gaps in his understanding of contemporary intelligence work and requested a private meeting to discuss how academic research could better serve operational needs. His message showed genuine intellectual curiosity rather than wounded pride, suggesting that the previous day's humiliation had prompted genuine reflection rather than defensive denial. Sarah agreed to the meeting, seeing it as an opportunity to build the kind of productive dialogue between academic and operational communities that could benefit both sides. The previous day's confrontation had been uncomfortable, but it had created possibilities for meaningful collaboration that might not have existed otherwise. The meeting took place in Dr. Blackwood's office, a book-lined sanctuary that reflected decades of academic achievement. The professor who had been so confident and condescending the previous day was now humble and genuinely curious about Sarah's work. "I owe you more than an apology," he began. "Yesterday exposed some fundamental assumptions I'd been making about intelligence work. I've spent years studying these subjects from an academic perspective. I realize now how limited that perspective has been." Sarah appreciated his honesty. Academic research and operational work serve different purposes. Dr. Blackwood, your research provides important context and historical perspective that helps operational personnel understand broader patterns. But there's definitely room for better communication between our communities. Their conversation continued for over an hour, covering everything from recruitment and training to contemporary operational challenges and emerging threats. Dr. Blackwood asked insightful questions that demonstrated genuine intellectual engagement. Rather than defensive posturing, "You'd be interested in guest lecturing for some of my graduate seminars?" he asked as their meeting concluded. "I think my students would benefit enormously from operational perspectives on the subjects we ought study," Sarah agreed, seeing it as another opportunity to bridge the gap between academic and operational communities. The invitation represented a complete reversal from the previous day's dynamic. When she had been dismissed as an unqualified undergraduate, now she was being sought out as a subject matter expert whose insights could enhance graduate-level education. Over the following weeks, Sarah's reputation on campus evolved from that undergraduate who embarrassed some professors to the student who's actually a federal intelligence analyst. The story grew in the telling, with each retelling adding new details and embellishments. Some versions portrayed her as a CIA operative working undercover on campus. Others suggested she was part of a secret government program recruiting college students for espionage work. The reality was both more mundane and more interesting than the rumors suggested. Sarah was indeed a federal intelligence analyst, but her work involved data analysis and threat assessment rather than the dramatic fieldwork that popular imagination associated with intelligence professionals. Her academic studies complemented her professional responsibilities, providing theoretical frameworks that enhanced her analytical capabilities. The eighth story was often about the complexity that lay beneath simple surfaces. Sarah wasn't just a student or just an intelligence analyst. She was both, in ways that challenged conventional categories and assumptions. Her presence on campus represented evolving approaches to intelligence recruitment and training that recognized the value of embedding operational personnel in academic environments. As the semester progressed, Sarah continued her dual role as student and intelligence professional. Her courses provided valuable perspectives on international relations, economics, and regional studies that enhanced her analytical work. Meanwhile, her operational experience brought practical insights, two academic discussions that often lacked real-world grounding. The incident at the symposium became a case study in its own right, discussed in faculty meetings and graduate seminars as an example of how assumptions about expertise could lead to serious errors in judgment. Dr. Blackwood incorporated the experience into his teaching, using it to help students understand the importance of remaining open to unexpected sources of insight. Sarah's guest lectures became popular events, drawing audiences from across the university. Her ability to translate complex operational realities into accessible academic language made her an effective educator, while her youthful appearance and modest demeanor made her an inspiring example of how young people could contribute meaningfully. 2 national security efforts. The 3 professors, who had initially dismissed her, became some of her strongest advocates on campus. Their public humiliation had been transformed into a learning experience that enhanced their own understanding and teaching effectiveness. Dr. Torres incorporated Sarah's insights into her cybersecurity research, while Dr. Patterson revised his human intelligence curriculum to reflect contemporary operational realities. The transformation was remarkable to observe. Professors who had been confident in their expertise discovered new humility and curiosity. Students who had accepted academic authority without question learned to evaluate ideas based on merit rather than source. The entire academic community benefited from the reminder that knowledge could come from unexpected places and that wisdom was not necessarily correlated with age or traditional credentials. As graduation approached, Sarah faced decisions about her future. The NSA wanted her to continue her analytical work full-time, possibly pursuing graduate education through agency programs. Georgetown offered her opportunities to stay on campus as a graduate student while maintaining her operational role. Both paths promised meaningful contributions to national security and academic understanding. Ultimately, Sarah chose to continue the dual path that had brought her to Georgetown in the first place. Her work demonstrated that the boundaries between academic and operational communities were more porous than traditionally assumed. The most effective intelligence professionals often benefited from academic perspectives, while the most insightful academic research incorporated operational realities. The 8th story was about discovering that the most important person in the room might be the one everyone overlooked. Sarah's youth and unassuming appearance had led 3 distinguished professors to dismiss her insights and attack her credibility. Their assumptions about expertise based on age and academic credentials had blinded them to the genuine knowledge that sat quietly in the back of their auditorium. The incident became part of Georgetown's institutional memory, retold to new students and faculty as a reminder about the dangers of intellectual arrogance and the importance of remaining open. 2 unexpected sources of wisdom. Sarah's story demonstrated that expertise could emerge from any background and that the most valuable insights often came from those who combined different perspectives and experiences. Years later, when Dr. Blackwood would tell the story to new graduate students, he would emphasize the lesson it had taught him about assumptions and humility. The moment you think you know everything about a subject, he would say, is the moment you stop learning. That young woman taught me more about intelligence work in 5 minutes than I had learned in 5 years of academic research. The 8th story was complete, but its lessons continued to resonate. In intelligence work, as in academic research, the most dangerous assumption was that expertise looked a certain way or came from predictable sources. Sarah Chen had embodied the reminder that wisdom could emerge from anywhere, challenging those around her to question their assumptions and remain open to unexpected insights. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey of discovery and the power of expertise beyond expectations. We've witnessed how intellectual arrogance crumbled before the quiet confidence of someone whose knowledge ran deeper than anyone imagined. Sarah Chen's story reminds us that wisdom has no age limit and that the most qualified person in the room might be the one everyone assumes knows the least. If this story moved you, take a moment to consider the assumptions we all make about expertise and authority. How often do we dismiss insights because they come from unexpected sources? How many opportunities for learning do we miss because we judge knowledge by its packaging rather than its content? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that challenge assumptions and celebrate the unexpected sources of wisdom that surround us every day. Together, we can build a community that values insights over impressions and immense substance over superficial credentials. Because sometimes the 8th story reveals that the most important lessons come from the most unlikely teachers. And sometimes, the person who changes everything is the one everyone thought they could safely ignore.